Welcome back to Lost in Games Unscripted. Today, we're talking about The Walking Dead, specifically the writing in Season 1 of The Walking Dead game. Now, I haven't done one of these unscripted videos in a while, so you'll have to just kind of bear with me. I'm inside, you'll notice this time, because it's like 100 degrees outside. It's really hot. So I wanted to film one of these. I've been wanting to do another unscripted video for a while, and I just hadn't had the chance to, so I figured I'd take this chance now that I've finally finished the series, at least the playthrough. The videos for the last couple of episodes of Season 4 will be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, and I just wanted to kind of start focusing on some different aspects of the game, because once it's done in philosophy and ethics, there's still a lot to talk about. And in this particular instance, we're going to be talking about the writing of Season 1, because Season 1 of The Walking Dead game is lauded as one of the best seasons of the entire series. And there's a reason for that. It is a very, very good game. And a lot of people point to the writing as one of the best aspects, the story, and just how compelling the narrative is. And it's an okay story, but it's not great. And there's a lot of places where it really falls short of what should be considered a great game, a great story, right? The reason why it's so fondly looked upon, I think, is partially because it's the Walking Dead universe, which was very popular when the game was released, but also because the characters are just outstanding. You know, if you look at Lee and Kenny and even the characters that people don't like Lily and Larry, they're very deep characters. They have a lot to them. There is nuance to how they act and how they look at each other, and it makes it a great game, even with a lackluster story. So when I talk about the lackluster story, there's some things that I wanted to bring up, and I'd actually started writing a script for this where I got all these thoughts, but I figured why bother with an entire script when I could just go unscripted for it, since I am breaking apart their script. And the first one that I really wanted to call out was these supposed choices that you have to make, right? There are several points in the season where you have to pick between characters. The very first one is when you have to pick between Sean and Duck and which one you want to save. Now, it irks me because this isn't a real choice, okay? This is one of those, hey, look what we're going to be doing to you type of things. If you try to save Sean, he dies anyway, and Duck lives with Kenny saving him. If you try to save Duck, Duck lives, but Sean dies, and then you're left to wonder, should I have tried to save Sean? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, I would restructure this if I was writing it as an author. You know, I've got a couple books out. You can go check them out on Amazon if you'd like. I would restructure this to be an actual choice between saving Sean, which you should be able to do, and saving Duck, but saving him from something more than just getting eaten by a zombie right away. Later on in the season, as it's written, Duck gets a bite, and you don't really know about the bite in the moment, but you find out a little bit later because, Katja notices he's not feeling well, and he's got the bite on the side. What I would do instead is, if you chose to save Sean, I would have Duck get scratched, but have nobody notice that it's a scratch from a zombie, and only have that come into play later on. Now, this would have ramifications for the entire story. It would completely change up a lot of things, because it would no longer be Ben's fault, so there would have to be another thing. You could still have been involved later if you chose to save Sean, because if you chose to save Duck, because if you chose to save Duck, then he wouldn't get scratched, and he would still wind up getting bit possibly later, depending on how the story goes. And that's just one small change, but it would have ripple effects through the entire game. I don't like how they have the Kenny versus Lily, and then Ben coming in, and then you don't have a chance to really interact with Ben. I would add in that you should be able to interact with Ben. You should be able to talk to him, get to know him a little bit, and he should be willing to come forward and be like, hey, I was approached by the Raiders, the guys that were just shooting at us. They came to me and they said, hey, if you give us supplies and you help us out, we're gonna, we've got your friends here, but we'll also stop attacking you. And then they could figure out a way to maybe get out of the motor inn under the cover of darkness without being attacked by the Raiders. Once again, saving Duck. I would like to see a situation where you could take Duck and Katja and Ben and Carly and Doug all the way to episode 5. And speaking of Carly and Doug, that's the second big choice that you have to make between characters. I would just take that out completely. I don't think that you should have to pick between one of those characters. I think they should both make it through. Again, based on some other choices. You know, if you save Sean and Duck winds up being scratched, maybe he's getting sicker and sicker. Maybe Kenny makes a mistake that gets one of them killed. But I don't think that you should have to necessarily pick between one of those characters. If your choices really matter, and Telltale played this up when they first came out, and we all know now that it wasn't quite as thorough as they tried to pretend. If your choices really mattered, you could potentially get to the end of season 5 or episode 5 with most, if not all, of the characters in a pretty good state. You know, I would have maybe a situation where you would go, depending on whether you sided with Kenny or Lily more often, I would say you get to the train potentially with an RV full of people, including Lily and Carly and Doug. And then if Kenny says, I'm taking this train to Savannah, it's going to be the best way to get there. But Lee, you've kind of treated me like shit and I don't really like you, so I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't want you on the train. Or if you're middle of the road, maybe he gives you an option. Or Lily doesn't want you with her. You know, I'd like to see something like that where there's a dynamic. And then Lily, Carly, and Doug would all head off on their own while you go off with Kenny. And yes, Lily and Carly, because in what I'm talking about, the kind of rewriting that I'm talking about, Carly and Lily wouldn't be mortal enemies. They wouldn't hate each other. They wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't have a situation with Lily shooting Carly, because it's stupid. It's something you don't need, that extra level of animosity, right? Season 1 especially, right? Season 2, 3, and even 4, you're kind of further into the apocalypse. You've got the zombies have become, they're still a threat, but they're not as much of a threat as other people would be. And so, but season 1, you still have the zombies as a threat. I think the you don't need as much drama with the characters because you have the zombie threat. You're trying to outrun that, right? I think by the end of season 1, where you find out all the boats are gone, maybe this plan wasn't such a good idea. That would be something that would kind of kickstart things into season 2 to kind of change the narrative from worried about zombies to worried about, let's get some survival stuff down, and then we'll start worrying about people. And speaking of, if you did have between Lily and Kenny having to choose between who to go with, you could still wind up in Savannah either way, because Clementine wants to see her parents. That's where her parents were. And I could see a situation where Kenny doesn't like you. You don't get on the train with him. You wind up going with Lily. And Clementine, you know, Lily says, hey, we should go to, you know, wherever. My dad talked about this place that might be safe. And Clementine says, I need to go to Savannah. I need to see my parents. And kind of guilts Lily into doing that. Because I think Lily is a deeper character than a lot of people realize. I'm going to probably do a friend or foe episode on her at some point now that I've completed season 4, because I think she's a lot more complicated and complex than most people give her credit for. People see Lily as this bad guy. They see Lily as, you know, she's just this evil person. Even in season 4, I know there's a lot of people that thought that she should be killed, that they didn't think that she should be able to make it to the end. You know, you shouldn't show Lily any mercy because she's just horrible. But I think there's more to her, and I think her evil is exaggerated for the game, which is another part of the writing that just drives me nuts, because you don't need to exaggerate this stuff. You can play this stuff up, and you can have her do things like disagree with Kenny and get in arguments and all of these things and get defensive about her father without having her be evil. She doesn't have to be looked at as some kind of evil, terrible character. And yes, in season 4, she comes back and she seems evil. But even then, there's more to it, because she's trying to defend the first place that she saw as home. They're doing it in the wrong way by kidnapping children and kidnapping people and making them into basically slave soldiers. But that doesn't necessarily equal evil. You know, it's a little nuance there that I'll have to get into at some point with one of the philosophy videos. That'll be something we'll be talking about here soon. But speaking of Lily and Larry and her relationship with Larry. One other major change that I would make would be in the freezer, in the meat locker at the St. John's Dairy. Instead of just having two choices, side with Lily or side with Kenny, I want a third choice. I want to have three choices in that scenario. You can choose to side with Kenny and just, get rid of Larry. You can choose to side with Lily, or you can choose to have Kenny wait on standby with a block of salt waiting just in case something happens. And then if you side with Lily, you're able to save Larry, at least temporarily. He will wind up dying at some point, not too distant future, but you can save him at least temporarily so he can say his goodbyes to Lily and all that kind of stuff. But if you choose to have Kenny on standby, you know that little thing that people argue about whether Larry was alive or not because he twitches his face? That twitch causes Kenny to overreact and toss the block of salt down. That right there, I think would really ratchet things up. Because that gives you the opportunity, one, if you can save Larry for at least temporarily, for Kenny to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't react so fast, and maybe he learns from that, and then in the future, maybe he hesitates to kill somebody, and that winds up causing problems, or maybe he shows empathy where he otherwise wouldn't. But I think just having that extra choice in there and that little extra nuance, that gives so many other storylines and potential things that you could do for the series that would be so much fun. The other big choice I want to talk about was with Ben, because I've seen so many people say that Kenny deciding to stay in the alleyway and shoot Ben was some kind of heroic act, some kind of redeemable thing for Kenny, and that they prefer that ending for Ben because it's the better ending for Ben than just falling in the bell tower. And I hard disagree on that, and here's why. I think that instead of having Ben fall into an alleyway, get impaled, and then have to be shot by Kenny, which has a whole bunch of issues, I think the better ending would be they all make it over the gap. They make it to where Kenny accidentally bumps Lee and causes the walkie-talkie to fall in the hole. And then Ben jumps down. Without hesitation, Ben says, we got to save Clementine, I'm going to get this thing. But then he realizes he's stuck, and oh, by the way, we start to hear zombie noises. And then Kenny says, I need to jump down and save this kid. Despite this kid getting my family killed or whatever, no matter what decisions you make leading up to, you can still have a situation, if nothing else, when they get to Savannah, maybe Ben makes a bad choice, it gets Koch a bit, or gets Duck and Koch a bit, or something. However you want to play it up, before that, he can still be mad at, and make it a redemption thing for Kenny. And I think that would be a hell of a lot better, because think about it this way. The way they have that alleyway, there is no way out. I don't care what Telltale says and their little excuses, and there was no way out of that alley. Kenny died in that alleyway. That is just the way it is. In the building, he could get out. He could find a door. You don't know where he's gone. You don't know how many zombies were in the room. It might only be 5 or 6. We don't know exactly how many were in there. So you could have Kenny escape pretty easily. You could justify that later to bring him back in season 2. Plus, that's as a redemption arc for him to say, despite the stuff that Ben's done, despite how upset and angry he is, he's still going to jump down there and save him. It works for Krista, to say, well, there's this person he barely knows. He's willing to sacrifice himself for her. But it's an even bigger impact if it's Ben, because he's willing to jump down and save this kid that caused the death of his family. That to me is a much bigger, even if you change nothing else in the rest of the season, just changing that one major thing, I think that makes all the difference in the world. And, for the writers, it's a little bit more complicated at that point, because now you have Ben and Krista and Omid. But hell, you could keep Ben on. That wouldn't be that big of a deal. And if you really didn't want him in season 2, you could have him dying to save Clementine in a cutscene between seasons or something. You could give him a better arc and make something better out of Ben than just, oh yeah, he was a screw up kid that died in an alleyway or was dropped in a bell tower. Ben was one of those characters from season 1 that I actually kind of liked him despite his flaws, maybe because of his flaws. and I think he gets a lot of hate that he doesn't deserve because of all of the the lying or not being completely truthful about his role with the Raiders until way too late. You know, pulling the hatchet out of the door, making just bad mistakes overall. He's young, dumb, full of shit. We were all there once, and I don't think it's fair that he doesn't get some kind of redemption or something. I think if the writers had been thinking ahead, if they had known, hey, we're going to go this direction, it might have been different. But I don't think that they knew when they did season 1 how popular it was going to be or what season 2 was going to hold. And realistically, if you're planning a series, if you're planning any kind of game, movie, television series, whatever, you need to have a full idea for the story and not just say, oh, this was popular, we're going to make another season. And I know that's difficult because, you know, they got to worry about getting greenlit and stuff, but like, there just had to be a better way. And that's the frustrating thing for me, is because the season was great. I loved it, but there were so many things that they could have done better that I really wish they would have. I think I've covered most of them in this video. I just wanted to talk unscripted like this, and I want to do more of these as I can, and especially if you guys enjoy this kind of laid back, sitting back. I've got my bearded dragon back here hanging out. I don't know how visible he is. It's my wife's bearded dragon. His name is Neville. But, you know, if you guys like this kind of stuff, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on season 1 specifically. If this does really well and y'all want to see a video talking about season 2's writing, season 3's writing, I'm definitely planning on doing those. But like, if you guys let me know that you want to see them, I'll prioritize them a little bit. Like I said, we've got a couple of episodes left of season 4 in the Philosophy and Ethics series, and then we're going to be moving on to either Red Dead Redemption or The Wolf Among Us. We'll see what the vote pans out as. those are the final 2 chosen by all you out there. So whichever game we move on to, we'll move on to the other one after that, and then we'll jump into some other things we've got. I really want to cover Detroit Become Human because I think there's a lot there. I recently finished the story on it, and there's just so much to cover and talk about. So I'm looking forward to covering that one in the Philosophy and Ethics series and all that kind of stuff. So that's all I got for now, though. I do want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.